Amy Beach is a really interesting example of a Victorian era woman who was incredibly driven, I think, in a quiet way, ambitious, serious about music, probably influenced very indirectly by the first wave of feminism, and she wanted to achieve. You think about Amy Beach writing this symphony, I mean, not only was she the first American woman to write a symphony, so she's writing for orchestras that are made up entirely of men. Women were not allowed to play in these orchestras. You know, a man is conducting, all the players are men. There wasn't a woman in the Boston Symphony till 1952. She was very much a trailblazer.
She was born in Henniker, New Hampshire. Later in life, she came to the MacDowell colony, spent summers in Peterborough, New Hampshire. So there was this kind of beginning, and toward the end of her life, she had this, kind of embraced her home state. The Amy Beach collection at the University of New Hampshire actually was created by a number of kind of devoted fans or people who had connection with Amy Beach. They all came together, I think in the 70s and 80s, and tried to build a collection that would maintain her legacy as, a foremost American woman composer. One of the more interesting things that we have is actually her practice piano that she took with her, I would assume, on trains, on ships when she was going to Europe. And it was to practice her fingering for performance later on. So it's kind of fun to have this three-dimensional piece that really represents, her work and career.
At first she started out as a performer. She was a child prodigy. She gave her first performance at the age of 7. Then at age 18, married a much older man. He was older than her own father.
When she married, her husband had her kind of pull back from public performance, and that's when she immersed herself in composition. And at the time, if you start looking at composing was a male-dominated pursuit, and so she was an anomaly. And I think that when people started listening to her music, it was really very exciting.
She thought she was the first woman writing a symphony. She didn't know that a few other women had, but she was certainly the first American woman to write a symphony. Amy Beach's style was a late romantic style, and I think she was very much in the nationalist vein of composition. Dvorak wrote his New World Symphony, and she started her symphony, I think, 6 months later, sort of in response to his symphony. And there was a lot of interest in the United States at the time in creating an American music. And she wrote that she should write based on the music of her own heritage. So Irish, Scottish, English, and she said there was a long history of that in the United States. So she used actual Irish melodies, 4 of them in her symphony. And, that went further than Dvorak had, certainly. And her symphony was premiered, I think, 2 years after Dvorak's. So it was a response and a counterpart in many ways to his symphony.
Someone like Amy Beach is so important to the kind of cultural history of the United States. As you look at her emergence as a performer and later composer, it was really tied in an era of tremendous growth in the importance of the United States on the world stage. So she was really emerging at the same time as this country was emerging. And I think it's important to to realize that we were not always a world power. We were certainly not a cultural center for the world. And so I think it's important to remember, the role that she played, as well as other, composers and artists in our development as a nation.